Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That was a lovely ad by Africa Muslim agencies about their drives all over the world. And standing by to talk with us from, I should imagine, a very cold Turkey is Hafiz Hassan Choonara, and he is the regional director of Africa Muslim agencies. He's now going to talk to us about the aid work being undertaken in that part of the world after having suffered two devastating earthquakes. As they were first on the ground in Turkey, doing their bit as far as relief and aid work is concerned. Hafiz Hassan Choonara, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Julie. Shukran for having us this morning on Salam Media.
And it does seem like it is bitterly cold where you are. Please tell us where in Turkey you are and why are you in that particular location today?
Right now, I'm speaking to you from Hatay province, or the town is Kiri Khan. And I'm at the Amma Operations Center. It's basically the warehouse where the teams come through in the morning, every morning, and then we obviously move out from here in terms of different directions and the plan for the day. So we at the what you call an operations center or nerve center, which is in Kiri Khan, not far from the affected areas, of the buildings that have collapsed. And obviously, we're about to move out to different localities. We're hoping to do this interview, obviously, at a different at one of the epicenters. But obviously, this is the scenario at the moment. And as you can see behind me is the piles of wood that will be taken later today to many families. And also, you can see a sample of a tent behind us that's being distributed in many parts of the affected areas.
Alhamdulillah, as always, you guys are always on the ground. You're busy. You're at the coal face of the issues, of the situations, and doing everything you possibly can to make a meaningful difference. How long have you been there? And just describe the despair, the destruction, how the people are coping, and importantly as well, how it's impacting on you and your team, because it must have an emotional impact.
Absolutely, Sister Julia. Alhamdulillah, we have Amma has permanent teams on the ground here in Turkey, and they've been on the ground from day one. Listening to them, explaining to us what unfolded when the earthquake happened, and how the teams mobilized to the different areas. Obviously, it was a scene from unimaginable scene. But alhamdulillah, the teams mobilized and have been active since day one. I personally am in Turkey for the last 3 days, just joining the teams and supporting the efforts that's already been done for the last close to 2 weeks or more on the ground here. Talk about the emotions. Yes, going through the various cities that have been affected. It's a city that looks worse than a war zone, but was never in a war zone. It's cities with complete destruction, perhaps more worse than a city that has been hit by decades of war but has never experienced war. I hope that gives an idea or perception or inclination of what the cities look like. You drive to Antakya and you drive through the streets deep into the suburbs, and there are rubble and buildings where people are still laying underneath, and that's it. You look at the buildings and the rubble, and there are hundreds of buildings, and not thousands of buildings that have collapsed. Even the buildings that are standing, people had to evacuate and are not allowed to or permitted to stay in the building because every single building in this place is damaged. And because the risk to their life of that building collapsing, they have to vacate. So it's basically a ghost town. The only traffic you see is on the roads with, aid workers, military, police, etc., that are, traversing through the various towns. Talk about the emotions. Yesterday, we visited a building that housed children. And to think still underneath that rubble, there's bodies laying there. And kids used to come to this building and this facility. When you walk, Sister Julie, when you walk on the rubble, and you see toys, you see game boards, you see kiddies books, you see dolls, you see cars, toy cars, everything that reflects of hope, of laughter, of joy, happiness, uh, of just having fun. And you think of underneath that stone and rubble and cement blocks and iron, and there are still young children laying there who lost their lives. Where are their parents? Where are their family members? Where are their siblings? What's their future? To give the listeners an idea of what's happening, many families, or all families that have been evacuated, those who have the means will go stay with family members. Those who don't have the means are put into camps that are controlled by the military and the government. And obviously, certified rescue teams are allowed to go into the buildings and try to rescue where there are signs of life. Alhamdulillah, we still see people being pulled out of the rubble who are living, alhamdulillah, but majority of the buildings, there aren't any rescue teams that are assisting because of the vast numbers of buildings that have collapsed. And by now, most of those people underneath the rubble have passed on.
Hassan, regarding going back to the uh, areas that have been affected, there are quite a number of those areas. Uh, do you get a sense that the authorities have now given up hope 2 weeks later, resigning themselves to the fact that they won't be able to do any search and rescue attempts, that all that's left is trying to dig out bodies, and that too is almost a futile exercise, because how many bodies are you going to be able to dig out? What is the way forward now? We're talking, what, 5 cities that were affected and millions of people, as you said. And just going back to your description of these cities that were struck by these earthquakes, looking like war zones. Someone in an early interview said that it's been a year since Russia has invaded the Ukraine, but even Ukraine hasn't had this amount of deaths in their country with a full-on war or incursion in their country to the scale of Turkey. Obviously, I'm talking in comparison, that the lives lost in Turkey within a few days is way beyond what the Ukraine has lost in a year on, with the Russians' invasion in their country. Is that what people are talking about as well?
To the first part of the question, there are still teams that are active on the ground. Rescue efforts are still well underway. Yesterday, when we were in Antakya, we passed a place, one of the buildings where obviously dead bodies were being pulled out of the rubble and then taken into like a van and taken away. But there was also some rescue teams active on one of the sites. Perhaps is a sign of life, and they are trying to get those whoever's inside out of that building. So there are still rescue teams. Yes, there's a lot of organizations around, alhamdulillah, all doing sterling work, all active. But many organizations have come in the last week, and many of them have left back to their countries. The effort is needed and urgently needed now, as people need to move on day by day. We are still in the midst of winter. It's bitterly cold. You could see how we are dressed with our gear, and the temperature drops. Talking about the mass devastation and connecting it to other war-torn countries, a death is a death, which is one too many, irrespective of the country you're staying in. And yes, the mass devastation in Turkey, when you drive around to think this is an earthquake, and like we mentioned earlier, you'd think this country went to a war or some sort of conflict just to see buildings and buildings and buildings and rubble, just, as far as your eye can see. It's not just one or two, but hundreds of it. And to think that still underneath some of or many of these buildings, there are people laying underneath. Many of them lost their lives. To think of the people, like, for example, in the town where I am now, Kerihan, you lost your infrastructure, you lost your family, and you lost your jobs. Companies are shut, and there is no employment. So every single store, industry, market, supermarket, whatever it is in these towns are shut, not because of the government doesn't allow them to operate, but every single building is damaged. So there is no income in the town. You cannot get any resources in this town. You have to drive out at least an hour, hour and a half if you need to buy something to get resources. So the people cannot go to work, cannot earn income. So we met families, Sister Julie, who were alhamdulillah, going by month to month, had a home. They were working, and now 7 family members living in a small 2 by 1 meter tent, below a mountain here in Hatay. That's the representation of many, many families. And to think of how many children would now be orphaned, how many grandmothers or how many parents would now have broken homes, and the result of that, of dealing with that trauma and still trying to move on. But still, in this hour as you speak, or night it falls, people are trying to keep warm and in a warm place. That's why the teams are active on the ground. We're providing the tents, we're providing the food baskets, the hygiene kits, the bedding, and many other items. We're about to leave now in the next few minutes to one of the cemeteries where all the bodies that have been pulled out are being buried. And from there, today we'll be building another a huge number of set of tents to identified families in around Kiri Khan. And also then move on to food baskets. We are waiting for delivery of some of our food from Istanbul arriving this afternoon, inshallah. And tomorrow we'll do much of the same, inshallah.
So Hassan, just give me a sense of, just paint me a picture. We know that a number of towns and small cities have been devastated, but you still find on the outskirts of those devastated areas, there are still solid structures that are standing and people inhabiting those structures. Are they safe to be there? And if they are there, do those people also need aid because everything is on shutdown? There isn't any trade happening. There isn't any food coming in, etc. Apart from you, African Muslim agencies and other aid agencies on the ground giving out food and whatever else is required by those people.
So in these areas, all buildings have been evacuated. Where I am, all buildings have been evacuated, even the ones that are standing. Like I said, 90% of the buildings are damaged, and so no person's allowed to be staying in the building. You find a lot of crane companies assisting families with trying to take the furniture out of their apartments, and obviously they're moving on to other family members in different parts of Turkey, or if they have the means, or else moving into a camp environment. So nobody's allowed to stay in their buildings in this part of the world, and you can see why, because none of the structures are stable. Either half collapsed. Every single building you look at is just a ghost town. Yes, perhaps an hour and a half outside the town, there are buildings and there are people staying in. But any building that's damaged has been evacuated. In terms of food coming in, yes, there's many organizations, alhamdulillah, international NGOs, people from around the world providing food. A lot of organizations doing sterling work. You can get food at the camps readily available, alhamdulillah, in numbers, open to anyone who needs, and there's no restrictions in terms of that. But in terms of shelter, there are many families that need shelter, they need warmth. Come the evening time, come 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening, it gets bitterly cold. Some of our team members have been staying in cars in the towns over the last week and a half, and we're putting up with the cold. But to think that, you see a family who have a home, and they, but they can't go stay in the house because of the unstableness of the home. So they stay next to the house outside with their furniture outside in the cold. And obviously because it's not stable. But Sister Julie, we have to run. The team are waiting for us. We have to go to undertake our operations for the day. And I think one of the messages to the donors in closing is that donate. People are in need in this part of the world. Think of Ramadan is coming. How people were planning for Ramadan and how different the Ramadan is going to be. They had, their wishes are now very simple. And buried underneath the rubble, all the wishes have gone. But we can make the wishes of Ramadan a different reality by donating towards the African Muslims Agency. The teams are active, they are permanent, they're based here, and they will continue well in the month of Ramadan and beyond, inshallah.
Hafiz Hassan Choonara, our regional director on the ground in Turkey, bringing us an eyewitness account of exactly what's playing out and their involvement in bringing much needed aid and relief to the earthquake stricken people in that part of Turkey. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all your efforts. May you as an organization grow from strength to strength. Keep safe, and assalamu alaikum to you. Okay, we seem to have lost Hafiz Hassan Choonara, but the interview had ended at that point in any event. It's time for me to wrap up. It is exactly 10 o'clock. This is News and Views on Salam Media, wrapping up on time for a change. And we thank you for your company. Thank you so very much indeed for being with us on the show this morning. Also, a big shout out to our producer and our controller. And that, of course, is you, Nasreen Naidu and Golani. Till tomorrow morning at the same time, as always, take care on the roads. Keep safe. Keep us in your du'as, inshallah. And don't forget, the important message today is the 29th of the Islamic month. Please remind your family, friends, neighbors, community members, in your regions to go in search of the hilal after sunset. And in the event of a sighting, kindly contact the UXA Central Hilal Committee on 083 786 2859 or your nearest UXA affiliate member to assist in facilitating the necessary Shahada procedures, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Ali.